Hi, Bec Mac here for Artsfront Little Lunch Online number 46. Amazing. Well done, Norm and Sarah, for pulling this off for so long. Now, today we are shining a spotlight on two regional theatres, NORPA in Northern New South Wales and JUTE Theatre in Cairns, to discover and learn about an interesting silver lining that has emerged around the crisis that's come forward. So I'd like to introduce Julian Lewis from NORPA. How are you, Julian?
Good, Bec. Hi.
Julian's the CEO and Artistic Director there, and Suellen Maunder, who is the CEO and Artistic Director of JUTE. Hi, Suellen, how are you going?
Hi, good, thanks. Hi, everyone.
Wonderful to have you both here to talk about the unique challenges that regional theatres have had to come up against during this COVID-19 period, and also through that, what interesting and exciting new possibilities and opportunities that have emerged from this time. But before we go into that, I'd firstly like to acknowledge the land that I'm on at the moment, which is Yagara land, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. And just a little bit of housekeeping, everyone. This goes for 30 minutes exactly. It is being live streamed to YouTube. You can catch it later on Little Lunch Online, which is on the website. We also have our fabulous captioners who are artists who have been employed by Artsfront to caption for these events. And today we have Lachlan and Emily, so you can tick on the caption if you want that as well. Also, you're welcome to say hello in the chat section and say whose land you are on today. And there will be potentially a Q&A at the end, but of course, all your comments are captured as well. So that's really crucial to the conversation. All right, I think I've got everything, Norm. So moving forward, a lot of conversations I've been having have been around what weaknesses and strengths have this period revealed to companies, organizations, work practices and relationships. Often working and living in regional areas is seen as a deficit, but potentially now it could be seen as your greatest assets. Julian and Suellen, what do you perceive right now as your greatest capital in regards to where you live and what work you've been doing? Julian.
Well, I mean, I think I always see living regionally as a very positive thing and something very lucky. You know, to be a theatre maker and artist and, you know, live on beautiful country. I'm currently on Bundjalung country, Arakwal land specifically. So I live outside Byron Bay in the hinterland, you know, and I'm very lucky to do so. And the theatre that I manage, that NORPA manages for Lismore Council, is in Lismore, so it's a half-hour drive. I guess for us, well, look, you know, it was interesting seeing the Melbourne International Festival launch with Gideon and Hannah's new program call out about site-specific work and ambitious promenade theatre, and it made me think, you know, that's what we've been doing. You know, we've sort of taken theatre to the people whenever we can. So all the work that I've directed or created or NORPA's created has been place-based. It's been highly visible for the community. It's been interactive in that we've researched the content of the show by people's stories in the region, and we, you know, have open showings and we make it as visible as we can. So we're not bound by a venue. So I guess what's highlighted, this period's highlighted, is just how busy we are running a venue, and when that stops, we've actually got a chance to kind of develop our new strategic plan, which we're beginning to take into our daily lives as of next year. And that really focuses more and more on site-specific work and creating work in the region. This is a very, very exciting area to live in, and it's an abundant place for story, both Indigenous story and non-Indigenous stories, but also just the clash of cultures in these regional areas is fascinating. And it's an important story for Australia to understand the richness of the landscape in which we live. So yeah, I'm finding it a really great chance to slow down, get off that treadmill of kind of programming and venue managing aspects. And we've got a busy team working on new plans and new projects at the moment, and actually a flatter kind of organisational workspace. I mean, people in marketing and comms aren't doing that, or PR aren't doing that as much. So they're working across developing youth programs and projects as well. So we're finding it really fun as a team. Mind you, this is fun now, but when it's first hit, this was shocking, and I had to make 5 calls to say you haven't got a job and all those sort of things. So we're through the shock and horror, and now we're looking at the kind of new world and working out, okay, well, how do we actually make this positive?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're living the dream, and we're all moving to your place.
You're welcome.
And now we're all jealous. Suellen.
Yeah, but
Are
I'll challenge that.
Are you in a similar place of having time and space to, I guess it's, mend the fences, or, like to, or like metaphorically, when you can't fish, you mend the nets. Like,
all right, it wasn't a regional kind of.
No.
We're out there mending fences, looking after the cattle.
Oh, yes, I had to do that just last week. No, I come from. I'm on Yidinji and Irriganji land, so it's pretty beautiful up here, and I would challenge Julian to say we live in the most beautiful part of the country, and we live in an extraordinary place where we're right on the edge of Cape York, and so we have a massive First Nations community and population in this region, but really JUTE's always done a lot of online stuff because we are in the regions. And so when we're developing a production and we have people from outside of the region working with us, we're working on Google Hangouts and talking with people. I think the same, we had to stop a show. So we'd had 2 nights of a season and we had to call a stop, and we were lucky enough to be able to pay out the artists on that project. And I'd say that the funding bodies have been incredible in terms of, leaving their funding with us and going, what are the things that you need to do? And like Julian, we have been looking at what are the other things our company needs. So boring stuff like putting in a whole new CRM. We still have our 5 permanent staff working. We've been doing a lot of that stuff, but also we have, don't you love this word, pivoted or pranced around or done whatever you do. And we've gone, actually, you can do things online. Things that we thought we would have to physically go to a place to deliver a program, and that would be too expensive, and how would you find the money for that, have suddenly become, oh yeah, we can do that online. So we're currently working with the RASN network, and if people don't know what that is, that's the Regional Arts Service Network that was set up almost 2 years ago, I guess. And those networks have been pivotal to how JUTE is working now. So we're engaging with online writing programs with young people, and it's extraordinary that you think, how are people going to focus on the screen for 5 hours a day on a weekend learning the craft of writing? And yet these young people have just eaten it up. And Catherine Ash, who's running that program, would send them away to go and have a break, and she'd come back and they'd be talking about their programs and what they were doing. So we've really been focusing on trying to see how we can keep supporting artists, supporting them to write grant applications. So just really connecting in that way so that we can keep people solid, I guess, and not drowning. So yeah, it's I think what we've found is things are more possible than you thought they might be.
Yeah. And you sort of alluded to my next question, which is around place. If you're a place-based destination, a cultural tourist destination, when we couldn't access these places, and in regards to a theatre, these spaces, you've already been grappling with those, both of you, in the fact that you are a distance from a larger population. But what have you come up with around that in regards to making your space, your theatre space, relevant, active, and part of the world again in this time, Julian?
Oh, look, we had a staff meeting this morning, and we're working out, you know, how to open and when to open and how that'll begin. That's sort of not where my mind's at. I mean, you know, we've talked about a courtyard bar and a projection show with live music, and people can walk past it. Those things are in our thoughts. But we have 5 projects currently being developed for that 2 of them are schools shows, and they're original works going into schools. And we have Flow also in the making, which is an Indigenous show. Mitch King is writing and performing, and it's a theatre show, part hip hop music. And that may not be able to go ahead this year, but what we could do is put it on outside and use the, you know, the natural environment to be its backdrop and really heighten its relevance and probably heighten the access of the work. So going into a sort of site-specific territory with theatre, I think, is probably our first step. And most of the works that I'm looking at creating or even programming next year will likely be in site-specific locations. So I'm not thinking about the theatre anymore being the place to build a relevance. I think the theatre is wherever we make it. And I think that's what I'm interested in at the moment, is how we've all, you know, we've all become really small into our homes, and that's been actually quite lovely. And we've realised how lovely it is to slow down a little bit and drive less and, you know, have less obligation. And in a way, it's been a real blessing for me as an artist who's also busy as a CEO. You know, like, it's a really hard mix, isn't it? To actually slow down and think about theatre again and making again. And in thinking about that, I've been thinking about my community. So where I live in near Federal. I don't know if you know that area, but there's like 2 shops up 5 minutes drive, and there's a beautiful big park. And, you know, I'm thinking more about my community here and thinking, what can I bring here as a step to socializing and connecting through story in a very small way. But I think those small gestures might actually be the way in which larger impacts can occur.
Yeah.
Because they're safer, they're genuine. I think if we just suddenly go straight up to 10 with programming and all of that stuff again, and programming is not what NORPA exists for. We're here to make, and the venue makes us obliged to present other people's works, which is also hit and miss. Let's be fair. So in a way, you know, we need to minimize risk at this point for the next 18 months going forward. And that is doing less and doing it better and doing it probably in a site-specific manner.
And sounds like in the process coming up with some really new, exciting ways to engage the community and make work. Suellen, are you going down that path as well, like getting the work out of the theatre into site-specific spaces that are within your place at the moment?
Yeah. No, not so much. JUTE's a company that's driven by the writers that we work with. So we have a cohort at any one time of 10 to 15 writers that we're working with. So we're developing those regional writers, and now we're stretching out across the regions. I think for us, you have to remember we've just come from being in a place of not being in our venue for 18 months. So our venue was being renovated. So we'd only just moved back there in January to what's now the Bumbajar Art Centre. And so it's just been divine to move back in there and to actually rehearse a new work and to open that show in there. So no, we're looking forward to getting back into the venue, but this year we will be focusing on doing creative developments of that work. So we've got all this work that's being backed up, and we want to undertake creative developments. So because we work with a lot of First Nations artists as well, we've just got to make sure that all of that process that happens in social distancing and being inside spaces can work for us. So we used to do a lot of site-specific work over the years, but the value of having a venue where you can create a world is still what we're going for. So we're hoping that Stage Queensland, which is our industry body in Queensland, is currently developing that COVID safe plan. And I think if we work towards that, again, we're about making work where we only do 2 or 3 shows a year. So it's about the making of the work, the developing of the writers, the developing of our JUTE Actors Studio, all of that. I guess capacity building is really at the heart of what JUTE does. So the performances and the seasons are kind of like, yeah, they're the icing on the cake, if you like. But we're always engaged out there in the community. And I actually think there's been a change. People are now turning around and looking at the arts for what the arts can do in terms of coming through this process, and how can we work with people to understand what's just happened. So there's been a lot of conversations happening with our Tourism Tropical North Queensland, the council, and lots of organisations are reaching out. Not just in our local community, but also from outside of this community, which is interesting, reaching out and having conversations.
Yeah. And also, I'm not saying it's your organizations, but there has been a conversation around relationships of some organizations to the artists, the independent artists, the lifeblood of the work making, and where that's sort of being reconsidered, and in the past quite an inequitable relationship based on power and money. And how has this been, has there been some new things revealed to you, and how have you reached out to the artists that are the core of what you do? Julian?
Yeah, Bec, I wanted to bring that up. It has highlighted the imbalance as an organisation, but I want to reiterate that that's because of a venue, and really being a theatre company that can be more nimble and create work. Like in Australia, we don't have ensembles, and I don't know really why. I ran an ensemble for 6 years in Sydney on the smell of an oily rag. In fact, no one got paid. Well, occasionally we did when we got a gig, but we were trying to be an ensemble of creators and devised theatre makers. So these are the challenges that I think theatre industry needs to tackle. For me, I mean, I'm a theatre maker, so I am an artist and I am employed, which is lucky for me. But we have an associate artist pool of 7 devising creators. Some are designers, writers, physical theatre performers across different forms and mediums. And we've been maintaining our support of those, but it hasn't been monetary. I've had to everyone's on JobKeeper. I've got 18 people on JobKeeper, and they're all technical production staff and venue staff. And me included in that. So we're doing what we can to survive, but it has highlighted the need for us to make sure that and in a way, that's why on a personal note, that's why I wanted to become the sort of CEO and artistic director, because I wanted to wrestle the resources back over to art making and theatre making.
Yeah.
And not have business driving us. When I have a GM and we're co-CEO, there's a kind of default setting in me that goes, oh yeah, you deal with that because you're the GM, you manage money and budgets. Well, actually we need to grab onto this as artists and understand where we want the resources to go and start to redirect the funding that we get to the artists more so. So we maintain our relationship with associate artists. We continue to put money into projects, but I'm not in a position to have a full-time ensemble like a dance company, and that's a shame. And I think that's the ultimate dream for many theatre makers, is to be able to work regularly with similar people and mix that up. But to create really outstanding theatre takes time, and it takes those connections and that understanding and that trust between performers and makers and designers to create really adventurous work. And that's what we're aiming to do. But in terms of staffing, all I can do is employ a new we've started a new youth theatre company, and that'll be a 3-day a week, looking for hiring a youth theatre director for NORPA, and also an associate director and a company manager. There's some new roles coming out through us. You'll hear about those if people are interested in the next, coming months. But yeah, it certainly reminds me of where the artists are. But lastly, I wanted to say, isn't it great that we are a passionate industry, that people have pivoted or whatever and wanted to put their work online? Nothing will hold down artists from creating. And whilst I haven't jumped into that space and I'm not really drawn to making or viewing a lot online, to be honest, I'm a traditionalist theatre guy who wants it live and wants to feel the audience experience around me. And I do think that the country is lucky to have an arts community that's that passionate and driven and professional to be able to dedicate their work and their lives and their imaginations to rebooting the culture and socialisation and the economy. We're based in Lismore, it's not a wealthy place. You can imagine the impact that we have when we have 28,000 people through the venue a year, and we have 500 performers visit the region a year and stay in beds for 3 nights or buy coffees and breakfast. So the impact is economical on these places as well.
Yeah. And
so, balancing that and artists and the imbalance of it's a tough terrain. You can see what I mean.
Yeah. And Suellen, you're in the same boat, CEO and artistic director. In relationship to that question also, how have you felt the state government has, like the feds have come out with a specific grant? How's the state government, what's their response been in supporting the independent artist sector, do you think?
Yeah, I think Arts Queensland have just come out with a new independent artist plan, funding pool. So I think they have been listening. Really interesting. They've been doing lots of conversation. While there are a lot of artists in Cairns, there are not a lot of artists that solely survive, particularly in theatre, through theatre contracts. So the reality up here is that most people have other jobs, have other work. So the job for us is to try and find out what are those funding opportunities that are happening, and to support those artists who wouldn't usually write a grant to write a grant, to think about the projects that they're developing. I think in Cairns, it's been a little bit like we have not often had an independent sector here. So JUTE over the years has tried to encourage independent artists to create work. But I think because it's such a small community, people have in a way relied on JUTE to produce the local theatre here. But now there are a couple of other companies emerging, which is fantastic. So our job is really to try and keep the conversation going with them to see how we can support them to get into work. So yeah, and I think, I do think that our Arts Queensland has really listened to the sector, and that they are trying to get things out there. They've been, in terms of us having programs that we can no longer do this year, they've approved repurposing of that. There's been a really great sense that tell us what you need, and we'll okay that, So I guess, yeah.
I think that, you probably find the state government, state government's just released a $50 million rescue package as well for companies in dire straits. And I think I sort of can't complain on the state and federal level. I think the federal conversation is a big one, and one that's ideological, and it's hard to get into with 5 minutes left. So I'm not going to go there. But in terms of our biggest threat, actually, it can also be the ignorance of the local councils around what we do and how we go about, and how a professional organisation runs. And I think with sometimes our local council or our local environment think that if there's no show on, that we're not doing anything, or that there's no show on, what are the staff doing? Well, we've got an extremely busy group of people managing a whole bunch of aspects And so it's an industry, it's a machine that needs constant work, constant connection and communication with stakeholders. And it's you know, so that's more my thread is the local council.
Yeah.
To be really honest with you. And you know, we're in a bit of a worrying scenario with them, and that's an ironic place to be when you're also recognised as one of the leading regional theatre companies in Australia that they don't really get it. So sorry, I just wanted to sort of share that.
Put that out there. And I mean, we do only have 5 more minutes, but so if anyone wants a quick question, put your hand up and wave, or write it in the chat. And this is my last question quickly. Going forward, do you think through this process, now that you may have the opportunity to broker a better deal with the community around the value of what the arts can bring collectively to the place that you live in? Suellen?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I definitely think that there's been a bit of a turnaround in terms of tourism thinking. Used to be reef of rainforest, and now it's special moments or something of that nature. So I think that people are understanding that people coming together and telling authentic stories can help us to, I guess, come back as a renewed community. But it also, because we rely so heavily on tourism, it can change how people perceive what this region is about. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of reaching out. I think it's been incredibly exciting because I love shining new things and creating new ideas. So I just think that there's been a great opportunity for us to rethink what we do. But the connections here have been really fantastic, I have to say, with local council as well. Even though they may not understand, they do see the shiny shows. But I think there's a little bit more understanding about what we do.
Yeah. What about you, Julian? Like, I guess similar, Northern New South Wales is the surf, the country, you know, like what's theatre in that? Like, is there a new relationship that can be built now, an understanding of the value of what you do and your community does?
Yeah, look, you know, I think our challenge is geography in that we're 40 minutes away in Lismore, and not everyone on the coast wants to drive there for theatre. It's a dark road at night. People don't do it. So our future is really site-specific work anyway. We were heading down that road anyway, and we've been doing it for 10 years anyway. So I think more of that, but also more on the coast, and you know, and I think that as I said before about that local, that regionality thing, I think that's what's exciting about building that trust again. And I think doing something in your local small hall, or in a park, or by the sea, or in a quarry, you know, that sort of stuff is what we're looking at. And we won't be able to do a whole season of that, but we would like to continue our exploration of large spectacle sort of theatre, because I think that is a way of doing what you're asking, which is building the real need for between the punters or the community and theatre. But also, when you think about tourism, I also think about people who come into these sort of areas and don't kind of know the story. There's not a large museum in Byron Bay. So, you know, how do we tell the history, and how do we get a sense of place? Otherwise, developers just cover up everything that is there that's kind of cultural interest. Sorry to be pessimistic, but, you know, that's what I see. And I think we need to hear those stories, share those stories, and give people, allow their voices to be heard around their stories about what life is about and what life's for. Otherwise, we do become like absorbed into this capitalist economy sort of mentality, and we lose our sense of kind of what life's for. And in a way, COVID-19, you know, I know is tragic for many people, and many people have suffered from it, but it's also been a really great wake-up call to slowing down. Silver lining.
And that's a perfect moment to finish on because it is midday. And I still can't decide whether I want to go to Cairns or to Northern New South Wales. I think you're both winners in the game. But thank you so much, Julian Lewis, Artistic Director, CEO of NORPA, and Suellen Maunder, who is a CEO, Artistic Director of JUTE Theatre Cairns. And also a quick note, if you want to jump now, because you haven't had enough Zoom, into the Australian Council Audience Research webinar, it's on at midday and there's a link in the chat on the side. So that's some interesting findings there for you all. I'm Bec Mac. Thanks so much, Norman, Sarah and Elliot and Lachlan and Emily and everyone else who's part of bringing these great conversations together. And there'll be another great one tomorrow. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.